Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sharon Bonney, and I'm the CEO for the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our legislative briefing on adult education. I'm going to go now to our next slide. We have some wonderful legislators who have joined us here. As we're waiting on Senator Young, we're going to go ahead and play a few short clips from legislators who've sent them in advance. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to go ahead and start those videos.
Hi, I'm Jack Reed. I'd like to thank the Coalition on Adult Basic Education for organizing today's briefing. I'd also like to acknowledge Senator Young and Representatives Grijalva and Yamath for their leadership in supporting adult education. Most of all, I'd like to thank today's panelists for sharing their stories and showing how supporting adult learners will lead to a more robust and more equitable recovery. Over 51 million adults have low literacy skills, and over 75 million adults have low numeracy skills. These are the workers on the front lines of our economy. Many are low-wage workers who risk their own health and safety to ensure our access to essential services. Others, working in the hardest hit sectors of the economy, have seen their hours and earnings dwindle. Building back better will require investing in adult education so that the system can grow, improve, and reach the millions of people who need an opportunity to develop the literacy, numeracy, and digital skills necessary to thrive in today's changing economy. I look forward to working with all of you to lift up the voices of adult learners and strengthen federal support for adult education. Thank you.
Great. So as the next video is being pulled up, I just want to take a moment here to welcome everybody and say we're just so delighted that you're here with us today. And we just heard from Senator Reed, as we all know, which was really exciting. And I believe we have two more videos that are being pulled up right now. So we'll pause for just a moment. Feel free to put your name in the chat box. And as we go along, you're welcome to add your questions to the Q&A.
I want to thank the Coalition for Adult Basic Education for hosting this, I think, timely and very, very important briefing, and for the invitation to say a few words. As essential as adult basic education continues to be to the economic and the social well-being of this country, I think our post-pandemic future is going to require more of adult basic education. And in turn, we'll be requiring more of Congress in terms of policy and resources for adult basic education. Because the repairing and rebuilding of our social and economic lives is going to be difficult. And the most important, I think, aspect of rebuilding right is the American people and the need and demand for an accountable GED process, English acquisition, remediation, the investments that we need to make in the American people and the American worker in order to prepare them for a just transition to other employment is going to require the adult basic education provide those services. And in order to satisfy that and begin that initial process, that's why I support very much what our congressional leaders in the House and in the Senate, the majorities, and the President have recommended in terms of a relief package. A relief package that is robust, that includes community colleges, that includes partnerships, that includes adult basic education, and recognizes that rebuilding has to begin now. It's a necessary step, this package, and I hope you support it. I look forward to working with the Coalition in advancing the effort, and thank you very much.
Wow, that was wonderful. That was from the legislator Grijalva, and we really appreciate his support. We appreciate that he sent in that recording. I'm going to take a moment now just to go ahead and share my screen. And I know we have a couple other legislators that will be joining us momentarily as well. But like I said, We have the following legislators who are champions and honorary co-hosts. That would be Senator Reed, Senator Young, Representative Yarmouth, and Representative Grijalva. So we're really appreciative of their support. So I'd like to take just a few quick minutes to talk about the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. Our mission is to inspire educators so adults succeed and communities thrive. And we do this a number of ways. We do this through leadership, professional development, advocacy, and communication. COEP represents the system of 65,000 educators that work out of 2,000 plus local programs and serve 1.5 million adult learners. And we have prepared a number of different tools that are really easy to use that provide national and state data points. So we have on our Educate and Elevate website, we have data sheets that drill right down to the county level, but we also have data sheets that give you information right there at the state level at the click of a button. And we just feel that this will be really helpful to legislators and legislative aides if you're interested in knowing what the skill points are for your state. There's some really big issues right now that are impacting the workforce. We know that pre-pandemic, there are 43 million adults that lacked the basic skills to compete in the workforce. We also know there are 51.4 million low-skilled adults in literacy and 75.1 million low-skilled adults in numeracy. These are huge issues when you think about that. 51.4 million low-skilled adults in literacy. It's hard to really even comprehend that. There's also 30 million adults that do not have a high school diploma, yet we know that all colleges and 63% of all US employers are requiring at least a high school diploma. So you can see the disadvantage that these individuals are at immediately. Also, 20% of adults with a high school diploma have only beginning literacy skills, meaning they were just pushed along. And of course, we know there are more than 28 million in the US that lack basic digital skills to operate a computer. And yet many of them are operating computers all day long and every day. So when you think about what that means to your business's bottom line, it's actually quite scary. You know, right now, the Adult Basic Education is working with local programs to help them reskill and help adults reskill for jobs that pay a family-sustaining wage. So often our adult learners are the ones that are the first ones out of jobs in a bad economy and the last ones to get jobs when the economy picks up. Our adult learners are the working poor. Approximately half of our learners are employed. However, they're often underemployed or employed in just part-time positions. So they're working at McDonald's or Walmart and just really trying to cobble together a life where they can pay their bills. We also know that there's some serious challenges that come with being low skilled, such as they're 2 times more likely to be unemployed, 3 times as likely to be in poverty, 4 times as likely to be in poor health, and 8 times as likely to be incarcerated. So some serious challenges. We also know that the Barbara Bush Foundation worked with Jonathan Gallup to put together a report that just gave a slice of information on the sorts of impact, the economic impact of literacy. If we were able, for example, to move everybody that was in level 1 up to level 2, that they believe that this would bring $129 billion in gain in GDP, or 0.6% growth, or $947 billion gain in GDP, or 4.6% growth, if they were able to move everybody from level 3 to level 4. And if we were able to move everybody up from level 1 and level 2 up to level 3, you'd see $1.4 trillion of gain in GDP, or 6.7% growth, which is just mind-boggling. Now we know that that would be nearly impossible to be able to move people up at this level. But when we think about how literacy really is that economic catalyst, this is just one report that shows that. There's a great return on investment, $2.5 billion in tax revenue and reduced expenses for every 400,000 adults who earn a high school diploma, which is a huge savings, a savings of over $6,000 per person. There's $200 billion estimated value to our economy in reduced costs for public support programs for low literacy adults. And GED Testing Service ran a report where they were able to show that over 47% of GED recipients go on to higher education and have a 90% rate of persistence. So I think that's just a really great indicator as well, that return on investment, that you can see that our adult learners have real grit, that when they go on, they get their GED, they go on to college and they persist. They have a 90% persistence rate. We also know that there's the individual impact. They typically, on average, there's a 53% gain in income over 10 years, and that just 100 hours of study can equal over $10,000 of gain for them, wage gain for them. So you can see that that really does impact them as well. Individuals at the local level there, but also we're impacting communities, right? Economic impact of literacy on communities and on individuals. Also, we just wanted to mention that a mother's education level is the greatest determinant of her child's future and her academic success, outweighing all other factors such as neighborhood and family income. So when a parent can read, they can teach their child to read or help their child with homework. And we know that this is really important when you're thinking about changing the trajectory of the family. It really does begin with those adult learners then helping their children. We wanted to mention that 74% of our adult learners are people of color. So adult education increases racial equity. This is not something that people typically think about, but we're really proud of it. We know that we're making a difference. We're right there working with our adult learners, and 74% of them are people of color. We wanted to show you a snapshot of our adult learners, and this is based on NRS. So when you look at that 1.5 million figure, who are they? And what types of challenges do they have? Well, 21,000 of them are displaced homemakers. They've been out of the workforce for a little while. A number of them, over 18,000, are homeless and runaways. Over 6,000 are foster care. They've aged out of the foster care system. Over 113,000 are single parents. There's migrant and farm workers at over 10,000. The long-term unemployed at 65,000 plus. English language learners, you see that there's over 943,000 that need to learn the language that come to through our adult ed programs. We have low-income adults, 321,000. Ex-offenders, 92,000. Those that have exhausted TANF, over 6,000. And those that are learning disabled at 63,000. So you can see there's some real barriers to employment there. And adult education breaks through those barriers. But what's so interesting is even though we are working with those who have so many barriers to employment, our field is severely underfunded. We receive on average between $400 to $1,200 per pupil compared to $10,000 per pupil in elementary education. As well, our teachers often on average take a 10 to 20% pay cut, and they often work multiple jobs. So we know that they really do it for the love of the adult learner. That's why they're in this field, which is great. But at the same time, we feel that there's a real issue there with that underfunding. We also wanted to just give you a quick snapshot. So there's, we owe a Title II adult education programs in every state, as you can see there. And we also wanted to just show you and demonstrate sort of the age of the adult learners and the We Owe a Title II adult ed program. So you can see between the 16 to 18-year-old mark, there's 123,000 plus. 19 to 24, we see 272,000 plus. This 25 to 44, more than 706,000. 45 to 54, 194,000 plus. 55 to 59, more than 58,000. And 60 plus, we're looking at over 71,000. So that really gives you a snapshot. And you can see that by far the greatest level here in terms of age is from 19 to 44. These are the adult learners that are served out of our 2,000 plus local programs across the system of adult education. As well, we just thought it'd be interesting to share this data with you. New York Times put this out. This is data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that indicates that adult learners that we serve are severely negatively impacted by the current state of the economy. So you can see the projected job growth by education level. When you look at this figure right here, those without the high school diploma, negative 2.3%. So there's a real issue there that our adult learners are the ones that are the most severely impacted by this pandemic. So that's all from me. I'm Sharon Bonney. I'm the CEO from the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. And now I'm going to introduce our panelists. And I'm going to
Sharon?
Yes.
I believe Congressman Yarmouth is on the line and would like to say a few words before we transition to the panel.
Oh, wonderful.
Can you hear me?
And hello. Thank you, Congressman Yarmouth.
Well, hello. Nice to be with you all today. And thank you for inviting me to not just say a few words, but to be an honorary co-host of this session with my colleagues, Raul Grijalva, Jack Reed, and Todd Young. Todd, when Todd served at the House, our names were together in the roll call, Yarmouth and Young. So, and we share a border of the Ohio rivers back then. So it's nice to be involved in the same pursuit here on the cause of adult literacy. My district of Louisville, Kentucky is the home of the National Center for Family Literacy, which is certainly a champion of these efforts. And I've been involved with them and on the cause of adult literacy since I came to Congress back in 2007, and certainly appreciate the work that you do and understand the enormous need for adult literacy and adult education to improve lives. And, you know, even this last year, the pandemic and what has ensued has illustrated an even greater need for adult education. We know that most of the jobs that have been lost, according to pursuant to the pandemic, have been low-skilled jobs. We also know that the economy, as it's evolving and how it's changing, and the job force is changing and will change, that the need for educated adults is going to be absolutely essential to fill the jobs of the future. And also because if you don't have basic education, you're not going to be available, or you're not going to be able to fulfill those jobs. So I think what you're doing is extremely important. It's incredibly important to our economy as a whole, but most important to the lives it will improve and the lives that it affects. So I thank you for the work you do. It's a great effort. I've been involved in adult education since I came to Congress. As I said, I've been the sponsor of the LEARN Act and other initiatives, the Adult Education State Grants Program, which I co-lead with Chairman Grijalva, and I'm proud to do that and look forward to continuing to work to make sure that the federal government does its part in supporting and promoting adult education. So thanks once again for letting me say a few words. I know this is going to be a very productive session for you, and I thank you all for the work you do every day to improve the lives of Americans.
Thank you so much, Representative Yarmouth. Really appreciate your time. We're so grateful that you stopped in here to this legislative briefing and shared those kind words with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Yes.
Wonderful. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Okay. So we were at the point here where I just wanted to take a few minutes and just mention our wonderful panelists here. We have Oogie Lamar from Michigan, Chiquita Boyd from Connecticut, Dr. Megan McBride from Georgia, and Dr. Don Finn from Virginia. So we'll hear from each of them. I'm now going to take a minute to introduce Oogie Lamar. Oogie, if you want to turn on your camera, wonderful. I'm going to stop my video and read your bio. So Oogie Lamar has been elected to the McKay board in 2017 as the advocacy chair. Oogie's experience includes 9 years as the director of adult education for the Wyoming Public Schools and the Kent ISD, with an additional 12 years as an administrator with the Wyoming Public Schools, serving as Newell Middle School principal and Omega Alternative High School's dean of students. So we would love to hear from you, Oogie. We have your slides up here, and we just love to hear what's taking place there in Kent ISD.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Representative Yarmouth. It's very rare that you get to say that you could follow a representative, so really appreciate you being here. As Sharon said, my name is Oogie Lamar. I'm the Director of Adult Ed for the Kent ISD. It's located in Kent County, Michigan, on the west side of our state. I have the pleasure of serving about 1,200 adult learners every year. Programs that we provide for our community are English as a second language, adult basic education, GED, high school completion. We also offer career and tech educational classes. So a year ago, actually just under a year ago, on March 13th was the very first day that that COVID kind of came into to play for our adult learners. And how have things changed for us? They've changed quite a bit. As you can see on the slide on the left, or the picture on the left, that was our graduation in 2019. It's always the finest time of the year. Our parents and our students, and some of our students, our parents, or a lot of them, our parents with their children, get to come and celebrate face to face with us, and we get to celebrate all the accomplishments that they've done throughout the year. But since last March, as you can see on the right, we had to make the transition, like all the other programs throughout the country, into remote instruction. For us, we didn't have the capabilities as our K-12 sisters did to make that transition as smoothly. And so we recognize that we've really had what we say here is a opportunity. Next slide, please. So having this and having the shutdown, it really affected the way that we operate as a program. We first took an inventory of the things that we had, and then also looked at some additional resources that we would need to continue our services. And again, when I say that we closed down or had our shutdown last March, that shut down everything. Our GED testing center was closed. Our adult learners weren't able to accomplish their goals of becoming high school graduates, and really took a toll on what we were doing. But what did we have? We knew that we had resilient adult education students that were prepared to work with us and make sure that we can continue those services for them. We had students who wanted and needed our services, again, in the adult education area. They don't have to be here. It's a conscious choice that they want to come and study with us, learn English, work on their job, ready skills. And so we knew that we had that. One of my biggest assets is that I have a superhero set of staff members that were really ready to roll up their sleeves and go through all of these challenges and make sure that we had those services and we're able to provide those for our students. Across the country, we got together with states like Texas, Oregon, Georgia, Indiana, West Virginia, and especially California to lead us through this process. Normally for us, our students come in and they register in person. The registration process was stopped, but these state leaders were able to help us and network together to make sure that we could continue those services for those people in our community. We do receive state funding, but we quickly found out that state funding alone would not allow us to help our students with their access to the internet and any other technological needs that they had. And we quickly recognized that the current system that we had of remote instruction was not working. And the reason why it wasn't working was because we had 0 students that were utilizing remote instruction. And so quickly we gathered and tried to realize what additional resources that we needed. The first thing that was on our list was digital literacy needs for that, not only for our students that we have, but also our instructional staff. Learning Zoom, remember a year ago when we had to all learn Zoom? That was something that we had to do, but it was even more challenging for us to help our students who are also learning the English language to also learn Zoom. We need a comprehensive professional development. We quickly got together with our partners throughout the state and again nationally to plan on ways that we could teach again our students how to access things remotely, and also our teachers on how to be the best practices of teaching remotely. Again, remote access was not around. Our students, one of the first things we did again is survey our students to find out who had access. A lot of them said that they did, but really as we took a little deeper dive into it, we found out that their remote access was most commonly their iPhones. And trying to do math computations on an iPhone is super challenging. So we weren't able to provide the true services to the quantity of people that we needed. Again, our students are parents, and a lot of them were able to see what was given to their students in the K-12 system, but the adult ed learners and the adult ed community was left out of that. And so what we're hoping for is equitable funding for adult learners across to access technology. Right now, we're only able to provide technology for our students, about 15% of the students that need it. Our classes are about a quarter of the size due to the pandemic. And so we're really hoping that federal assistance will allow us to provide those services for our students. And again, we hope that this is long-term funding. It's just year one in what we do. We hope that that will allow us to continue this into the future. Next slide, please. So what does the future look like in adult ed here in the Kent ISD? I am an extreme optimist. The students and the pictures that you see in front of you today are taken within the last several weeks. The two gentlemen on the left are welding graduates. The guy to the extreme left is an 18-year-old young man. He's homeless, but he has his welding certification and he is interviewing this week. And so we hope that we can get him into a safe environment where he can be able to participate in the West Michigan workforce. And maybe on the right, those 9 pictures there, those are our phlebotomy graduates. And so we know with the onset of COVID-19 that these 9 plus their, we should graduate in about a week or so, 36 phlebotomists. We know how important that their role is in this pandemic in helping us to get vaccines into the arms of Americans. And we hope that we will be able to receive the federal funding that will allow this to continue. I just thank you so much for this opportunity to speak and hope that you'll be able to support our adult learners moving forward.
Oogie, thank you so much. We really appreciate you sharing about what's taking place there in Michigan in your program, and we appreciate your leadership there with your 1,200 plus adult learners. So keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to take a moment to introduce a lady that I have a lot of respect for, as I do for each of these panelists. Chiquita Boyd grew up as a young girl in New Haven, Connecticut, and she loved school. She loved learning. She loved exploring new ideas. She was active and engaged and eager. However, there were many obstacles Chiquita would have to fight in her life. And so I'm going to ask her to share, to start her video and unmute herself. Chiquita is our esteemed adult learner who's going to share about her journey. So Chiquita, please go ahead and share with everybody here about your journey to get your GED.
Okay. As a kid, I always loved school. My mother was a drug addict, and because she wasn't able to take care of us, I was placed in the system. As a child in foster care, described as having behavioral problems and then placed in special education, the opportunity to get a good education was out of reach. Being in DCF was complicated. I was placed in foster home after foster home, which led me to changing schools multiple times. Being placed in alternative schools made me believe that I wasn't smart enough, so I didn't feel the need to apply myself. I advocated for myself while in group homes, residentials, and even a home for older teenagers, but my voice wasn't heard. I recognized how unfair the system was to me and how it was keeping me from my right to receive the education that I needed. I signed myself out of DCF at age 18. However, because I was no longer in the state's custody, they refused to pay for my education, and I was forced to leave my school and the group home they were providing me with at the time. When I found my mother, she was only 2 months clean. She gave me advice which kept me going. She told me not to make the same mistakes that she did. My mother never finished high school, and I knew the road was going to be challenging, but I wanted my education. Regardless of what I was told, and despite being conditioned to believe I was ignorant, I was determined to get my diploma. I signed myself up at the New Haven Adult Education Center. Starting school, which I did multiple times, was easy. Staying in school was the hard part. Overwhelmed and distracted, I passed my language arts, science, and social studies test in my hometown. However, because I faced chronic homelessness, which as a young woman makes you vulnerable to predators, the loss of my mother, PTSD, which caused me to be in constant survival mode, and being forced to choose between working and getting an education, my road to success was basically impossible. Due to the fact that the city of New Haven carried so many hurtful memories, I moved to Danielson, Connecticut in 2018. By this time, I had taken and failed the math test multiple times, but I wasn't going to give up. So one of the very first things I did was find my local adult education center, EastCon. 2 times a week, I would walk down the long road to my school with no street lights or sidewalks, mostly at night. Once I had enough money, I bought a bike so that I would be able to get to my school. Walking to school at night was better than staying home isolated with my abusive partner. Going to school for me was my way of getting away from the reality of being in an unhealthy relationship. Learning at EastCon was a safe place for me. When the pandemic hit and the testing center closed, my life was in shambles. There was no point in going to school because I had already failed the GED math test multiple times, and let's face it, 10 years is a really long time to keep working on a goal without much success. It wasn't until things got physical with my ex-partner that I realized I needed to go back to school and finish. Once I received an email from my guidance counselor that EastCon offered virtual classes and would loan me a Chromebook and even the special calculator for the test, I signed up for classes. However, learning in a virtual classroom was hard. I have PTSD, so staying focused and sitting still in my room alone with my laptop was challenging. At the time, I was receiving Social Security disability and I couldn't afford my own Wi-Fi, so getting a good connection was a struggle. I would often try to find a quieter place to work, such as the Killingley Library, but the fear and anxiety of contracting COVID-19 kept me from doing that as often as I could. Against all the odds, in December, I was able to take the GED math test again, and I passed. Now that I have my GED, doors have opened for me. I no longer am discouraged by the words said by multiple teachers in the past, despite being told I could never be president or that I wasn't smart enough or that it was too hard, I still persevered. And now that I have this newfound confidence, I know that my dream of becoming president one day is possible for me. It is my goal and my passion to help people like myself who have been told no and that they can't achieve their dreams. I know that not giving up on myself and continuing to pursue my dream of becoming president is the perfect example of what people can do when it feels like the whole world is against them. It's my honor, and as a survivor of not only domestic violence, but childhood trauma and abuse, to be able to use my voice and story to give back to people and to give hope. EastCon Adult Education made being an adult high school student easier than most schools I attended because they were able to provide me with technology and multiple forms of study materials to get me ready to take the test. Without their help, support, and understanding, I would have given up on graduating. EastCon's ability to adapt to this crisis built a support system for me that I can always depend on. My next step is enrolling in community college to study environmental science. Then I plan to transfer to a state college to study political science. In conclusion, my opinion is that adult learners need both in-person and online education. I didn't have the luxury of a parent figure to take care of me. Adults have to work sometimes 2 to 3 jobs. We have to provide for ourselves. And if applicable, we have to take care of children, sometimes as a single parent. In addition to this, there are unexpected things that come up, such as your car breaking down, the death of a loved one, or the birth of a child who's arriving a month before its due date, a pandemic, or another natural phenomena. I believe that it's important to have these two options because people need choices and they need flexible opportunities like myself who have learning disabilities and are embarrassed that would benefit from online learning because it can give them a sense of security and will rule out unnecessary judgment or bullying by teachers or students. Adult education will benefit from guidance counseling that offers a therapist who specializes in adult mental health. Taking standardized tests is stressful, and the mental stability of the adult learner is something that you should invest in because without a healthy mind, you don't have healthy employees and you don't have healthy parents. It is nearly impossible to contribute to society when your mental health is being neglected. Transportation for adult learners with low income is another way that you can help. Cars are expensive and public transportation is sometimes unreliable and unavailable. Living in an area like Danielson, Connecticut and having to walk or ride my bike at 7 p.m. at night is unsafe. So funding something like a small van or even a school bus for adult learners who receive food stamps or other state benefits will motivate change and allow those of us who don't have the money to get to school safely and more often. Thank you.
Chiquita, you're awesome. Thank you so much for sharing with us. We loved hearing about your journey, and we know that you represent millions of adults out there who need services. So thank you again, and congratulations on graduating. Wow. So I'm going to go to our next panelist, which is Dr. Megan McBride. Dr. Megan is the Vice President of Adult Education. She is a former adult learner who's worked in education since 2007. I mentioned she's currently serving as the Vice President for Adult Education at Georgia Piedmont Technical College in metropolitan Atlanta, Georgia, where she has worked since 2018. In this position, she oversees a large program that serves more than 3,000 students annually in adult basic education, corrections, English as a second language, and integrated English integrated English literacy and civics education, as well as testing centers that offer the GED exam and HiSET. So Dr. Megan McBride, I'm going to go ahead and move forward in your slides. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Sharon. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Megan McBride, and I am a former adult learner from the small rural town of Moultrie, Georgia. I dropped out of school with only an 8th grade education after experiencing a series of crisis pregnancies that began when I was just 14 years old. While pregnant for the 3rd time at 16 years old, I enrolled in an adult education program that helped put me on the path to economic self-sufficiency, which allowed me to escape an abusive relationship with my children's father and follow my dreams. After earning my GED, I went to a technical college to learn job skills that led me to meaningful employment. And what you're seeing here in these pictures, on the left is me with my first baby just 6 weeks after I turned 15 years old. And on the right is me with my second child at 17. And the week before that, I earned my GED, which is pictured below. Next slide, please. While working and parenting full-time, I also attended Valdosta State University full-time, where eventually I earned bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degrees. And there I am with all of my degrees. Over the course of the last 14 years, I have worked in various positions in the field of education. My journey has come full circle, as I now serve as Vice President for Adult Education at Georgia Piedmont Technical College in Metro Atlanta. Like Sharon said, my program serves over 3,000 students annually in adult basic education, English as a second language, and corrections programs. As a former adult learner, I understand the unique challenges and barriers that our students face. The pandemic has interrupted schooling across this country for an entire generation of students on an unprecedented scale. But for adult learners, for whom educational and social inequities have long existed, schooling interruptions are all too precedented, and the pandemic has only served to amplify those conditions. During the pandemic, innumerable accommodations have been afforded to schools and students in K through 12 to help mitigate the effects of the schooling interruption, like suspension of standardized testing mandates and distribution of technology and wireless internet access for students. Although it took a near universal schooling disruption for this to happen, it demonstrates what is possible for adult education. As we have seen, systemic changes are achievable when schooling interruption is normalized. Our students, who have re-entered school after already experiencing a disruption because of some life circumstance, need accommodations such as these. Next slide, please. Lack of access to technology has always been an educational barrier for economically marginalized students like the ones we serve, and that has been amplified in the pandemic. Local programs such as mine have carried a heavy burden for making our services accessible to students using existing grant allocations. My program has not seen any increase in funding to help us reach our students. Thankfully, our state office delivered a learning management system to the local programs to help us reach our students. Not a single member of my staff, other than me, had any experience with this particular LMS. Because our program received no additional funding to build the LMS, I had to pivot 3 full-time staff members from their pre-pandemic duties to LMS development. And over the course of 9 months, they worked tirelessly to build a content-rich framework, while the remaining teachers used an a la carte toolbox to deliver instruction remotely. To date, we have not returned to face-to-face instruction because of the heightened pandemic risk in our area. Instead, we rely completely on our homegrown LMS to teach our students. Next slide, please. The pandemic fundamentally altered how adult learners are served in Georgia. Prior to the shutdown in March 2020, only 5% of student contact hours were distance learning, and only 2% of Georgia's adult learners were distance education students. Since the pandemic, 96% of all contact hours are distance learning, and 93% of students are distance education students. In my program, both of those numbers are 100%. Next slide, please. For a variety of reasons, including accessibility and the long-term closure of K-12 schools in our area, the pandemic has had a dramatic and lasting impact on adult education enrollment. In Georgia, when comparing FY21 enrollment to date with FY20 enrollment to February prior to the pandemic, we can see that our total enrollment has declined by 57%. That is nearly 19,000 students just in Georgia, fewer than before, who are receiving basic literacy and numeracy instruction because of the pandemic. Next slide, please. In my local program, we have seen an even more dramatic decline in enrollment. Our corrections program, as you can see, has all but disappeared, with a 96% drop in enrollment. Although we have been able to set up remote instruction in all 3 of our correctional facilities, various pandemic-related challenges have precluded those students from attending classes remotely. To date, we have served only 8 students in corrections this fiscal year, all of them remotely. Overall, our program's enrollment has dropped over 70% from last fiscal year. The data clearly show that we are not reaching our students. Thousands of students need help accessing our programs, and we need help reaching them. These students desperately need our services, particularly in the midst of an economic downturn, when learning basic literacy and numeracy skills could lead to families being lifted out of poverty by finding meaningful employment. Adult education transforms. I know that because I am the product of adult education. I would not be where I am today without an accessible adult education program. For thousands of adult learners across the country, the pandemic has made an education even harder to access. As my personal story demonstrates, students like me can thrive after a schooling interruption with the proper support. Without adult education, I might still be living in poverty. Instead, I used my GED to transform my life trajectory by attending college, which allowed me to access a career where I could earn a family-sustaining wage. The complexity of the work required to reach our already hard-to-reach students in the midst of a large-scale interruption requires additional funding and support to implement systemic changes that make adult education more accessible at all times, but especially in the context of this existential crisis. We have an opportunity and a responsibility to rethink the schooling interruption brought on by the pandemic as a possibility to accommodate and innovate for our students, to allow for more equitable and responsive forms of education that can lead to life-changing outcomes. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Megan McBride. And I think you all can probably see why she's now the alumni advisor to our board. We are so proud of her and so thankful that she's lending her time and talent to COABE in this capacity into the field of adult education. So thank you for sharing all of that, Megan.
Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome. Before I introduce the next gentleman, Dr. Don Finn, we actually have another legislator who has sent in a short video. So I'm going to stop, mute myself and stop my video, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to share that video.
Hello, I'm Senator Todd Young. Right now, millions of adults in the United States lack the tools and resources to succeed in today's ever-changing workforce. During my time in office, I've introduced a number of bills to help combat this issue, like my Access to Careers Act. This bill aims to boost success and career readiness by increasing work-based learning opportunities. Additionally, I introduced the Bipartisan Upskilling and Retraining Assistance Act that would increase the amount of tax-free educational assistance that employees in workforce development programs can receive from their employers. This bill would also modernize the program to cover expenses for tools and technology that are required for educational programs. As the coronavirus pandemic continues, many Hoosier workers are left with few places to turn. We must invest in our workforce and provide working adults with opportunities to succeed. That's why supporting adult education is so important. Thank you and God bless.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we really appreciated hearing those words of encouragement and explaining why adult education is so important. I'm now going to take a moment to introduce our president, Dr. Don Finn. So let me pull up the slide here real quick. Dr. Don, I see you've turned on your video, which is great. Dr. Finn is an associate professor of adult education at Regent University in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and is the current president of COABE's board of directors. He has been an adult educator for nearly 30 years, has served in a number of capacities as COABE's board member over the past decade. He's also provided leadership for various statewide initiatives for the Virginia Department of Education Office of Adult Learning, the Virginia Adult Learning Resource Center housed at Virginia's Commonwealth University, and he's done a lot for our field. So I want to now turn this over to Dr. Don Finn.
Sharon, thank you so much. And I just want to, first of all, say that, and really to echo what Sharon said, which is on the next slide, that the mission of COABE is to inspire educators so adults succeed and communities thrive. And I think that you can see through Chiquita's story and Megan's stories both, how inspirational they are. They represent adult learners across this nation and whose lives have literally changed, whose trajectories have changed because of adult education. And ultimately, they have also positively impacted their family trees. So adult education reaches quite a bit more and quite a few more people than one might imagine. Next slide, please. So I want to talk just a little bit about the efforts that COABE has been involved in here, particularly because of COVID-19. Actually, in May of 2020, COABE conducted a survey of its members and was really asking for some feedback and some direction based upon 13 COVID-related or COVID-focused webinars that we had conducted during the month of April. We had an unbelievable turnout. Our webinars normally would have between maybe 100 and the biggest ones would have 500 participants. Between these webinars, we had more than 50,000 registrations. These are adult education professionals from the field who were just hungry for information on how they can better serve their adult learners in this time of COVID. We had about 1,400 folks who responded to the follow-up survey, representing about 82% of those were teachers, identified as teachers or administrators. And they were individuals, 65% identified as working through school districts or community colleges, with another 8% identified as working in correctional settings. So that's about 73% of the respondents who are receiving public funds for their work. Now, the majority of the folks participating said that the webinars that focus particularly on resources and methods for their practice, to enhance their practice and to engage their learners in the classroom, those were the most popular. We had sessions that had to do with Google and Google tools, and those were the ones that had the highest participation and the highest regard. The 2020 conference that we had was scheduled for early April in Baltimore. Well, it became pretty evident, and it's hard to believe it's been a year now just about, but it became very evident in March that the pandemic was going to be much more than a little flu epidemic, that this was a major incident. And so what we ended up doing was working with the folks in Baltimore to reschedule our conference for August. But even then, as we got into April and into May, we realized the conference was not going to happen. So under Sharon Bonney's leadership and the home team and a lot of sweat equity through those folks, through the board members and so on, we were able to put on a virtual conference that actually began in late June of 2020. That virtual conference, what we did was we had those folks who were registered, about 1,800 or so who were registered for the face-to-face. We had them come to the virtual conference. We also had them bring a friend as well. So we ended up having over 3,200, about 3,240 participants who participated in this online conference, which spanned the last week of June and into early July. We ended up having over 300 sessions. People were just hungry for professional development, and particularly the discussions focused largely on the pandemic. We also made efforts to increase our partnerships with affiliate groups that are interested in adult education issues and literacy. We work closely, of course, with NASDA, which is the National Association for State Directors of Adult Education, just as one, but we also worked with the National Chamber of Commerce, with the National Governors Association, and other groups to really give some exposure and shed some light on adult education and what value adult education brings to societies. We also continued our communications and actually had close communications with OCTE, the Office of Career and Technical and Adult Education, housed at the Federal Department of Education, to make sure that the voice of the field was being heard and to talk about issues about student testing and so on. And we also embraced and even furthered our relationships with corporate sponsors such as Google, Amazon, IBM, Apple, T-Mobile, and others. We also worked very closely with state associations, state adult education associations, who are also seeing a major shift with their memberships and how they do business, how they put on their conferences and provide professional development and communications and information on effective instruction in this time of COVID. So we did quite a bit there, also working with state directors of adult education, as well as local teachers and administrators. Next slide, please. So this is where we are now. We are looking at COVID-19 relief recommendations. And so based upon our partnerships and based upon what we're hearing from the field, we are asking for a $1 billion in funding for adult education state grants, for funding to go specifically towards adult education programs within the 50 states. We also are asking for this funding that it can be applied to support and supply educational technology. That's a huge need that our programs have right now, to have that educational technology and that infrastructure. You know, I think about what Megan shared with the professional development and the training that she and her staff had to go through for their learning management system, with Megan being the only one that even had familiarity with it. We need to have some technological infrastructure, but we also need to think about not only that training and development, but also to think about equipment. For example, 5G hotspots for those individuals who do not have internet accessibility, particularly those folks who may be away, probably in the rural areas and places like that, but it's just as much of an issue in urban areas. Also for laptop and or tablet technologies for instructors and for students. These funds would also go towards online-based learning programs. There are a number of vendors that COABE has been affiliated with for a number of years now that offer online resources originally designed to supplement instruction, but now have become a mainstay of instruction for some programs. And also for, as I said, the technology training, hardware, software, learning management system training and support. We're also asking for that $1 billion, part of that to go towards the brick and mortar facilities. When we look at the needs that these physical environments have, and with people going back to face-to-face, looking at PPE and also social distancing equipment, and also for enrollment and testing resources to be able to service and to be able to place our learners in the proper coursework. And also additional instructional and staff support, because we envision an uptick in individuals seeking adult education. Next slide, please. Finally, looking at appropriations. When we look at appropriations, what we're asking here is for the adult education state grant program to increase by $1.35 billion over the next 5 years. So that's an increase annually of about $135 million each year. And this is money, again, the appropriations to go directly to these programs, directly to those boots on the ground and those folks in the field who are instructing and who are running these programs. Now, what are the benefits? Well, there's a lot of benefit. First of all, it will continue the high quality programs for the current learners, for those learners that have been able to stick it out and have been able to continue to access and participate in their programs, but also to service more adult learners. Particularly what we have found is a tendency after an economic downturn that adult education program participation and enrollments tend to go up quite a bit. And so we need to prepare the programs for this influx of post-COVID enrollments, and also for new outreach efforts for those in need, to reach out to those students, to reach out to those potential students in various ways in order to get them enrolled in the programs and to get them the education that they so need. So I do hope that as you look at these requests, that you look at the necessity of them for our learners and for our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fenn. We appreciate that. And now I'm going to go to Regina Sue. She's our Vice President for Membership, former Public Policy Chair, former Chair for our Students as Leaders Committee as well. And Regina, I know folks have been submitting questions in the Q&A, and we'd love to be able to answer those.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you so much, everyone on the panel, for doing such a great job explaining what adult education has done for you, but also for the nation. I want to ask either maybe Oogie or Megan, what are some of the positive lessons you've learned from this pandemic, whether it be through remote learning or other aspects of the pandemic, and what sort of things do you hope to be able to continue into the future? So what are you going to try to take from the pandemic and move into the future?
Well, from our standpoint, we have great state leadership that has helped us through this pandemic. So as a community of adult education and literacy partners, we keep our eye on our students. We know that we truly make a difference, and we're able to help them grow and learn. They do become family. And so in Michigan, and I think throughout the state, we have utilized the COABE as a avenue to reach out to other states and to grow. And so I know that growth will stay. Megan on the panel is become a friend of mine. And so I know if I need to share some resources and things with her. And so just the community that we have as educators. But then again, I see the successes. As I showed in those pictures before, I've had students that are going on and able to change their station in life and their families. And so that keeps us going. And so that's maybe the good part of the pandemic. The little tiny slice of good is learning our resilient character and our ability to adapt and still provide continuous education to our students.
And Regina, I'll respond for Georgia Piedmont. We'll be keeping our learning management system and continuing to offer remote learning to our students, even when and if the pandemic becomes only a bad memory. And part of that is because my staff worked so hard to create it, but also our students in a survey indicate that 75% preferred remote learning. So it is a responsive form of education that adult education desperately needed. It allows students who aren't able to come to campus, who maybe have families or jobs, to attend classes in a way that better suits their particular circumstances.
Thank you both. I want to try to get one question into Chiquita. Could you tell us, Chiquita, do you think that there are other students like you, or do you think that you're representative of other students?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think there are a lot of unheard stories that, you know, people don't get to sit here and be chosen. I think that because EastCon was so attentive to, you know, what I was going through, and it was reciprocated. I gave them, you know, a lot of what I was going through, that I was able to be here today. And I do speak for those who cannot be in this position. So I think it's a little bit of both.
Great, thank you. And just, you know, such an inspirational story. And I will vote for you if you run for president, guaranteed. Dr. Finn, would you mind talking a little bit with the few minutes we have left about what do you think the field will benefit from this extra, not only the extra $1 billion in response to the pandemic, but the additional monies that would come every year?
Yeah, thank you so much, Regina. One thing that I can say is that adult education programs really know how to do a lot with a little. Adult education programs typically, the funding levels are typically pretty low, but we have such hugely dedicated administrators and teachers. What I see happening with that funding at the local level is to really bolster up the infrastructure. I think that the pandemic probably took most industries by huge surprise and required some very quick shifting of practices and so on. And I think that one of the areas that adult education has really needed to catch up on is the technological infrastructure, to be sure that the technology is there for the instructors as well as the training for them, but also for the students, so that the adult learners will have access to loaner laptops and tablets. And again, as I said before, possibly even Wi-Fi hotspots in order to stay engaged and in order to continue on their trajectory. I also see that once we get back to the face-to-face environment, that we're going to need to ensure that we have enough staffing available in the way of not only teachers, but also teaching assistants and other individuals in order to provide sufficient instruction. And there tends to be a pretty high degree small group learning as well as some one-on-one instruction. And we also need to ensure that our intake and that our tracking systems are up to date, that we have the technology and that we have the staff in order to keep those records to demonstrate student achievement.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Finn. We're a few minutes over here. I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank Regina. I'd like to thank the legislators that joined us and the legislative aides that took the time out of their busy day as well, and anybody else that took time here. We're really grateful. We are thankful for adult education and the transformative power of adult education. And we just want to end again, asking for that additional funding. And we want to also end noting that you can reach out to COABE at any time. We're available here. You can reach out at info@coabe.org, and we'd be happy to provide additional data to you. So with that, we're going to sign off here and say thank you again, and we'll see you another time. Bye now.